Hi everyone, welcome to our second session on the day, which is about repositories as EOSC provider. Earlier this morning we had libraries. If you weren't up early enough to attend that session, but you would like to still see it, we'll post the recording of that session and of all sessions this week to the website this week still, so you can rewatch or watch the sessions that you've missed. Starting this session and introducing EOSC for repositories, we have Sarah Jones. Sarah is EOSC engagement manager at GÉANT, where she works with NRENs on supporting open science. She's an information professional with over a decade experience working in research data services in the higher education sector. And she now also sits on the EOSC Association Board of Directors. And Sarah will introduce this session for you. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Katrin. So I'll just share my screen if you can unshare. And apologies to all of you for any background noise. I'm actually in an airport at the moment, but hopefully the Wi-Fi will hold up and there won't be too much background noise just now. So I wanted to talk about why repositories should join EOSC. In each of these sessions, we're speaking about different stakeholder groups. And I think repositories are one of the key service providers and content holders that it's really important that we have involved in EOSC. And already there are quite a few different types of repositories that are engaged in EOSC. So we have disciplinary data centers or catalogues that kind of index different disciplinary data centers. We'll hear an example from CESSDA, which is a consortium of social science data archives in one of the showcases we have later on. We also have institutional repositories that are part of EOSC. So many universities will have repositories for both publications and data. There are various national repositories. One of the examples here that's part of EOSC is Dataverse.no. It's a kind of national installation of the Dataverse software that's run for all of the universities. And unfortunately, Philip Konzert, who coordinates the work there, he couldn't speak. So I've got a few reflections on lessons from him that I'll give at the end of my talk. There are also various generic catch-all repositories that are part of EOSC, like Zenodo, and commercial providers who either run an instance of their software that can be used by others, like in Figshare, or they may have kind of subscriptions that people can buy as well to run the software at their own institution. So there's lots of different types of repositories that are part of EOSC. And I think because all of the data that we want to use, the content's held in so many different places, we want all these different types of repositories to get involved in EOSC so that users can find the relevant data and services. So a couple of thoughts from me on why repositories should join EOSC. I think primarily it's to increase visibility. So both of their data, so they hold lots of important collections, and you want to make sure that's indexed in other ways. So people don't only have to come to your repository and search there. You want it indexed by Google, you want it indexed by EOSC so that people can use the cross search. I think if you were in the earlier session, Paolo was talking about the work they're doing to enable discovery across different repositories. And at the moment, we don't yet have this common data search, but that will come. And I think this is why it's important repositories engage now. It's also so that their services can be found by relevant researchers. So many researchers may not know where they can deposit their data. And there are catalogues like Re3 data that you can list your repository in, and that helps to increase visibility. But hopefully using EOSC as well also helps people to discover your repository service. And in discussion actually with Mark and Taina, one of the things that came out is also this desire to have some kind of endorsement or acknowledgement that your repository service meets EOSC criteria. It's meeting the rules of participation. It's something that is a robust and sustainable service and something that meets European Commission guidelines, because you want to be able to give some kind of stamp of approval to your service. And probably yesterday, you will have heard about the EOSC core and the underlying services we have, like the AAI, the way that you can use single sign-on, and services like monitoring in the help desk. There are some kind of horizontal services that your repository can connect to. So there could be benefits for your repository service as well in joining the EOSC. So the final slide from me is just to give some lessons learned that came from Philip and then I'll lead on to the showcase talks. So he was saying they registered 2 services, dataverse.no and another service called Trolling, and they were not always clear whether the service is relevant for EOS. So some of these services are either just for one specific domain, or they're just for one particular country. So in their case, it's a Norwegian service. It's not something that researchers in Germany can deposit data into. So they weren't sure whether it's suitable to register it in EOS. And the process of onboarding can also take some time, getting familiar with the forms, knowing what you need to provide. The key kind of issue they'd had in the process was that there can be differences in who can access the data from a service versus who can actually use the service, who can deposit data. So I think when we're talking about repositories, they have 2 primary functions. It's providing access to the content, but it's also providing the service of, being a repository and storing the data and curating it. And in their case, the data is open to everyone throughout the world. There's no issues. It's kind of freely accessible, but they have a remit to only serve Norwegian researchers. So they can't take deposits from people in the Netherlands or elsewhere. So currently on the EOSC forms, there's only one kind of set of license, or what is your policy, but it's different for different functions of the repository. So that's something that we need to, improve on those onboarding forms. So those were some initial reflections on lessons learned from repositories. And what I'll do now is hand it over so we can go to the first of the showcase talks from Mark, and then open up the Q&A.
Yeah, so our next presentation, we're moving forward with 2 talks by the view on EOSC from repositories. And first up, we have a presentation by Mark Hahnel, who will be presenting the Figshare repositories. For the last 8 years, Mark has been leading the development of research data infrastructure with the goal of collecting reusable and interoperable academic data. He also sits on the board of DataCite and the advisory board for the directory of Open Access Journal. Before I give the word to Mark, I would also like to point out that we are collecting your questions and feedback via Slido, and you'll find the link to the Slido in the chat. And then Mark, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me talk. I'm going to be talking for about 10 minutes. I'm going to jump on immediately because I've left this spinning GIF a little too long, and replace it with another one. So for those who don't know, Figshare is a generalist repository. It started as a generalist repository. I was an academic. I needed to make some data available, and I had nowhere to make it available. Things like Zenodo didn't exist at that time. And so started building out a platform where anybody can come along, upload some files, add some metadata, make it public, and get a DOI. And so some of the things I did in the first instance were for myself, what I thought a repository should look like. We should be able to visualize any file in the browser, so you don't have to do all these conversions and things like that. But what I would say is, we are big believers in best practices. If there is a subject-specific repository, you should use the subject-specific repository. The idea of generalist repositories, and there's a few of them, is to make it sure so that everybody has a place to make their data available. But I think as data has become more of the future of academia, I think, in the last 10 years since we've been going, as we've seen this progress and the funders saying you have to make your data available, I have no qualms with the generalist repository going away and having a subject-specific repository for everything, or an institutional repository, data repository, or organizational data repository, as long as somebody has a place to make their data available. So that's how we started. You can see an example of a few of the files made available on Figshare, as I say, with the different visualizations. And what I'm talking about today is what we call Figshare for Institutions. It's our organizational off-the-shelf software as a service repository. And so we do a State of Open Data report every year if you Google State of Open Data. And this is where we survey our researchers who are using Figshare and to try and understand what are the thought process around sharing data. And we use that to help shape some of the product development along with the librarians we work with. But this also triggered why we thought offering an institutional version was a good step forward. One, it's a sustainability model for us. We do not take grant funding. We provide software as a service to institutions, funders, publishers, and that is our sustainability model. But what we saw was a lot of the concerns around research data from researchers. You know, there's a lot of things around unsure about copyright and data licensing. I'm unsure if I have permission from my funder or institute. So even if your funder might be saying you have to make your data available, the researchers themselves is still a slow trickle through to understand exactly what you should be doing and what you can do with your data. And so providing a place where anyone can make any of their data available is one thing, but in order to move the needle, it's working with the people who can help that. So if I just go back there's, you know, not receiving appropriate credit or acknowledgement. We can help with that in that we track views, downloads, citations, and altmetric scores, and you can click through and see the papers that have cited your data, the altmetric scores. That's good for helping encourage the impact, getting impact for all of your research data. But what was really needed, particularly in this move towards findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable data, is if you have some data sets and a Figshare for institutions repository, it may be fair for humans, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable for humans, but it's harder to make it fair for robots, for machines, right? It's harder to make it machine readable for everybody because still a lot of people will call their data set, which isn't great. You need some human curation in there. And so if you have the librarians, if you have the people with the skill sets who can basically manage and operate a repository with a bit of bandwidth to help talk you through what you should be doing, then that's a much more scalable way to get towards fair data for humans and machines. And we can see we can achieve some of those advances that we're hoping for. So in our institutional workflows, one of the things you can have is a review process where the files are submitted and somebody, the organization, if they are lucky enough to have one or several librarians who can check the data for them, can make sure that the data is well curated or at least has a more descriptive title than data set, making them more usable as a standalone output, which ultimately leads to more impact for the data as well. We did a pilot with the NIH and that's what we found. So this is what the repositories look like. As I say, we accept any file format. We aim to preview them in the browser. We started off as a data repository, but we have a lot of universities now who use us for their paper repository, their thesis repository, their data repository, all of them in one repository or one of each. So you can see the Francis Crick is more focused on papers over there. So we design a lot of our functionality around just files and metadata, making them tick all of the compliance boxes. You can also have sub-repositories where you can have, the geophysics group, which has custom metadata for the geophysics group, and the music archive having a different set of metadata or different sets of workflows for the different research outputs. In terms of the other side of that, why would a university want their own repository for data? It's they want to be aware of everything that's coming out of their organization. It's their research data. They should have a copy. The other thing to emphasize here is it's their repository, so they can control whatever workflows. We just become a software provider in this. So you get your own custom domain. It's branded in your own way. You get your own API, so you can plug into all of your other systems as well. And there's the professionalization element of just, we have SLAs, we have guarantees around uptime. We have, just like any other web company, you can see the breakdown of all of the different subsystems and see, make sure that you can get through your university compliance and what have you. And as such, we also have the localized stuff. So this is 40U in the Netherlands, and you can see that when you go to log in, you log in via Surf Connects. So we want to plug into the local systems where they exist, because it is their repository, and we want to adhere to their workflows around archiving or any other thing. We also plug into a funding database, so you can hard link identifiers for everything, including grant codes, which makes it really good in terms of compliance with funder mandates going forward as well. We are a DataCite node, so we can either plug into your DataCite DOIs if you already have a DataCite account. We can provide DOIs for you, which again, we mint, but they are yours. So if you move to another system, you take them with you. If you want to use handles, we can use handles. If you want to use both, we can use both. And we work with JAX in Japan as a different DOI provider there as well. So why EOSC? Just to round us all off. This is the idea that, as I say, we build policy compliant infrastructure for organizations. We work with hundreds of organizations around the world, and we have regional thematic things that need to be done. And so we need to be aware of everything that's going on in the different regions to make sure that we are providing the best service to those clients. And so, you know, we have some very generic, broad ranging certifications, such as ISO 27001, but some of the other stuff we can do as well. So we worked with the Department of Homeland Security in America. That needs to be on AWS GovCloud in America. We do that. We work with single sign-on integrations that are usually national based, whether it's South Africa or Australia or the Netherlands or Sweden or the UK. We work with all of the different single sign-on systems. We look at accessibility, making sure we are ticking the boxes for regional accessibility for WCAG AA, GDPR, obviously in the UK, and EOSC falls into this bracket. EOSC is one of those things that we need to be aware of. When the EOSC meetings get going again, you will see Figshare people there trying to keep abreast of what is going on. Because as we see more and more mandates coming out from funders, we want to be aware of what's going on and making sure that the people we work with, the clients we work with, know that we're working with the correct organizations. So being indexed in EOSC, we wanted to make sure that we were at least in the loop on the conversation. As I say, before COVID, we were going to all the meetings. On a similar story with the NIH General Repository workflows they have going on. I have meetings on that this evening. So we follow each of the regional ones. And if you are a European organization and you want to comply with the European policies and follow the European workflows around fair data, then the EOSC is the person to work with. So that's why we work with them. And a great example of this is when Google said they were going to do dataset search. They announced a new metadata schema for datasets. All of our clients said, we need to mark up because Google are going to be doing something in data. This was in the September. In the October, every one of our clients was all marked up for Google dataset search. Google dataset search didn't announce what it was until May, June next year, the following year, but we made sure that all of our clients were ready for that. And that's what we hope to do with EOSC as well. So just as we move through these steps that have happened over the last 50 years around recommended open access to papers and data, mandated open access to papers and data, and enforced mandated open access to papers and data, we want to make sure that the repositories we build are ticking all of these boxes so we can make it as easy as possible for our clients to enforce the mandates and to make sure that they're complying with all of these policies that come out from the European Commission, UNESCO, other places. That's everything from me.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for that super interesting presentation. We have another one that I'm sure will be equally interesting by Taina Jääskeläinen. She will introduce the CESSDA data catalog and its connection to EOSC. Taina is a senior specialist at the Finnish Social Sciences Data Archive. Her expertise covers data discovery, data harmonization across languages, and multilingual controlled vocabularies. She's currently the service owner for the CESSDA data catalog and CESSDA vocabulary service. So the perfect person, I think, to give this presentation. Taina, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, we can. And we can hear you as well. So all set.
Okay. So I made this presentation together with CESSDA's technical officer, Joshua, who has more knowledge on the onboarding, the practical side. Okay, so CESSDA is a discipline data repository It's metadata on research data. So what it contains are the descriptions of data sets created for social sciences and some for health sciences that are provided by the national social science data repositories in different European countries. The descriptions contain the normal creator, title, abstract, information on methods used to create data, keywords, topic terms, and some such information. But what the catalog doesn't provide access to the actual data files. So it provides a link to the website of that particular data set on the national repository webpage. So the user might be able to download it directly from there, or there's some other kind of access procedure. So, but the data catalog collects all this information, all this metadata, and allows discoverability of all these resources together. Right. And it's already onboarded to EOSC. So why CESSDA wanted the catalog to be in EOSC? We consider this to be a valuable resource, but so far there are not a lot of use. So we will hope that EOSC will increase visibility. And also, if we consider EOSC to be a central site to find European scientific resources, we think it also helps researchers from outside of Europe to find this particular resource. And of course, reuse of already existing data, as has already been pointed out, means getting more with the same public funding used to create the data. So you already use something that is already existing instead of creating another data set of a similar kind with the same public funding. So you get more out of your euros, so to speak. And of course, this having the data catalog in EOSC facilitates data sharing, and as it's a cross-national data catalog, of course, cross-national research, and for longitudinal research, to be longitudinal research, you really need to have some kind of data repository to be able to access the data from earlier periods. And as for onboarding, the onboarding process, while not really difficult, requires some effort and understanding of the process itself. And what is essential from the organization point of view or the provider point of view is the commitment of the management, because you need different stakeholders to be able to do this. You need to have the content people, like service owners, the content representatives. And then you need the technical people, because they need to make sure that the resource technology is up to date and is kept up to date as time goes on. And of course, there needs to be a roadmap for the resource, because there are going to be some future work to be done on it. And also important is that you have adequate service documentation, that you have the user guides and the policies, and these are written out. Because the user guide for users, if you have a lot of different resources and someone finds this resource, of course, they need to know what it's about and how to use it. And as practical tips for onboarding, what CESSDA did was download the profiles, the provider and resource profiles, and they put it in Excel and then answered all these beforehand, because it turned out that you need different people to answer all the questions. That some people can answer some questions and the other stakeholders can do the other questions. And so at the time of onboarding, you already had somewhere where you can just add the answers. And sometimes it seems that some providers think they need to answer all the optional questions before onboarding. And so they might get stuck on with not having answers to one or two, but optional questions are optional. So the advice would be to when you have mandatory and the ones that are really relevant for you answered, you can fill in the online form, and then the online form can be updated at any time. So you can fill in more answers later. And then the current benefits and challenges, it's just like Sarah said, that there's a basic monitoring service that monitors the use of your onboarded resource. And then the help desk service. So if a data catalog has a feedback button, and if a user fills in the feedback form, the help desk service helps you so that the feedback gets to the right person who can answer the questions or is interested in seeing the feedback for improving the service. And the challenges are that the profiles really do contain quite a lot of questions. And the navigation in the provider portal is not always self-evident. So that's one of the challenges. And then you have these, when you have these answers and in the profiles, and then you click on the download, and there's a control vocabulary where you choose the value that your repository or resource represents. Sometimes it's not so self-evident what each value means. So what exactly is an aggregator and how it compares to the other values. So it would be really useful if there was some information with definition of these. So it's a control vocabulary, and you could see the definitions of each of these vocabulary values, what they mean. So that would make it easier for providers to know. And actually, that was my 10 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot, Taina, for that presentation. I saw that we have quite a few questions in Slido, so let's start going through those. First question that we have is specifically for Mark. People are making it very easy for me to just saying who they want to answer the question. So someone is asking, IOFAIR is most important, and it is focused and it is the focus for EOSC. So how will Figshare implement interoperability and reusability of the FAIR principles? Yep.
So I think that's a great question, because you can split it immediately, right? It's us as a service provider. What is our responsibilities to make that to make all data fair? And the thing I mentioned about, I think there needs to be a people element in there. So with this, the free Figshare and Figshare for institutions, Figshare for organizations. So Figshare for organizations technically can tick any box, can tick all of the boxes to provide a fair repository for your organization. That doesn't mean that every repository that Figshare provides will have all fair data, because if you have no one checking the files and your university allows someone to upload a picture of a potato in a old file format that isn't open and calls it potato, that's not very findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. But we will make sure it's indexed in the right places in Google dataset search and what have you, because that's what our requirements are for your organization, right? That's what the SLA says. So in terms of the free version of Figshare as a generalist repository, this is where I think there's the question is, does it need to exist? If we take it away, is there a problem in that more people won't be able to make their data available in a way that they can track their citations and things like that? Because we offer that. The things that we are doing for the free version is we are doing more around basically automated checking. So your title doesn't seem to be descriptive enough. We suggest you go back and edit it, and it will create a new version of your file, and it'll have more descriptive metadata. Here's the reasons why you should do that. The other thing we've done as well is we've started something called Figshare Plus, which is if you have a large data set, that we have a librarian in-house who will take that data set, check it for you, curate it to make it fair, and make sure that data is available for the next however long, the 10-year minimal requirement, but forever from a legal point of view. And so that is a for-fee model, because the time to check the files takes money, as you know, if you're a librarian at a university. So in terms of the interoperable and reusable for machines, just because I know I'm talking a lot here, I think the biggest example right here is what DeepMind did with AlphaFold, the protein structure database, to say we now know we took data from 2 repositories that was quite homogeneous, and we were able to use it for our AI and our machine learning in order to find new knowledge. And we went from having 30% of the protein structures of humans to 100%, 99.999%, which overnight. And if that's what we need to get to, then from a technical point of view, we will make sure that the APIs work to allow any of that. The data is available in a fair way. From the curating the data to make it interoperable and reusable, we'll either work with libraries to make that happen, work with funders to make that happen, or we'll try and automate it on the free version.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I think that's a very comprehensive answer. And there's a question specifically for Sarah about national aggregators, maybe national infrastructures in general, but there is a strategy for harvesting the institutional repositories through national aggregators. And this person specifically refers to Recollecta in Spain.
Yeah, excellent. So first off, I must say I'm not the best person to speak to this, because I don't deal with that kind of aggregation side. So Paolo Manghi is the one who's leading on that, but I can give you my understanding of it. As far as I'm aware, the kind of standards we're working to are based on OpenAir Provide, and I'll put a link to that in the chat so that anyone who's interested can follow up. And there's already been work within the OpenAir Provide to make sure it works with common platforms like Dataverse, so that anyone who has a Dataverse repository, it's easy to comply. And they've done work with like bioschemas as well. And I think one of the things we do need to do is also work with national aggregators. So there have been a series of kind of projects like EOSC Pillar or EOS Nordic that have catalogues at that level. And we can't be asking repositories to index themselves in the national catalogue and then also in EOSC. So we do have to have something that eases the burden for everybody. I don't know exactly what is in the work plan of EOSC Future for that area, but we certainly should be making things easier. So we should be working with, I'm not familiar with Recollecta, but I assume it's similar to like the Pillar catalogue. So yes, hopefully, and if not, we will make a strong case for it.
And if the person asking this question, if you want extra information, I think, as Sarah said, the best is to get in touch with Paolo Manghi, who is the expert on this. Next is another question I want to pass to you. I think the next two might be related. So someone is asking or is saying that commercially driven solutions have no place in open science. So I think I would like to pass this to you first, Sarah, because I think you can speak from an EOSC point of view on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have some sympathy with the view there that, you know, open science is about being open source, but there isn't that restriction within EOSC. We have, you know, the core platform and the exchange, and the aim of the exchange is that it's all kinds of services, so open source as well as commercial. And I think, you know, we have to engage with commercial services as well. So when you look at Mark's presentation, and the commenter here said, you know, great presentation, it is very good work that Figshare is doing. And I think what we need to do in terms of our EOS guidelines is make sure that commercial providers are held to account and uphold the principles of open science, you know, that they are collaborative, they have open APIs, they make the content accessible in an open way, they're not locking it in and, you know, getting people stuck to their business model and, you know, essentially doing the kind of the publisher way of doing things where they're closing off content and actually destroying the academic process. So, you know, I think we do have to work with commercial providers, but we have to make sure that they keep the terms and the spirit of open science.
Yeah, and I think something that I would want to add here is that specifically for commercial providers, it is something that the EOSC Future project is looking at as well. And we have a session about commercial providers and their role in EOSC tomorrow. I think tomorrow at 11, but it might also be 10. So it will be like, it is something that we're working with. And if you want more information on what that would look like and how we make sure that we keep the spirit of open science while working with commercial providers, I advise you join that session. I don't know whether there's something that you would want to add, Mark, as a commercial provider or as
yeah. No, I mean, we welcome everyone's opinions. It's just your opinion, man. You know, the thing we've said since day one is we aim to put in more value than we take out. I believe we do that. I think the standard that we're held against, if you look at web accessibility, if you look at ISO standards, if the whole repository space could be held to that standard, that would be fantastic. But it doesn't get held to that standard because open, man, open, right? So I think it's a two-way street, but I will continue, and I continue to say, don't trust me. I'm just a person, right? I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Trust the contracts that you are signing with the organizations that we work with. We say, if it's a good fit, it's a good fit. The same way that most of your organizations will probably use Gmail or Hotmail for their email accounts now, instead of building their own email providers. If they just need a system that works, that's what we can provide. If your university is lucky enough to have the resources to spend more money on building out other stuff, so taking an open source repository, hiring 5 developers and building more stuff that pushes the needle forward, fantastic. That's what the space needs as well, but not every organization has that.
Yeah, so I think there's room for diversity is what I'm taking away from that. Actually, I have another question for you, Mark, which is specifically on how you will work with the Fair Data Objective Forum to ensure interoperability, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, no, so I wasn't so familiar with that. So this is a great example of where I think we've been hindered by the last couple of years of virtual organization fatigue. And, you know, I myself have been to a lot of conferences, and I find myself drifting off and starting to just send emails instead of actually listening to what's going on, and realize I've missed the whole conference that we paid £500 to attend. So I've just Googled it now and looked it up, and it seems to be aligned with a lot of what we're doing. I'd say the fact that we haven't been going to as many EOS meetings is where we'd find out about these things. And that's why I'd say that it's a good value add to be involved in this conversation, because we find out about things like this. And with all things like this, if somebody is creating, there's a few organizations creating fair badges as well. As soon as we get to fair badges stage, we will be implementing them based on the community standards, because it's community standard driven that we need to work towards. And so I also noticed from just looking at the website as well that there is an interest group in the RDA. So we go to every RDA.
This FDO is something that Peter Wittenberg spun out, and it's very similar to the RDA groups, you know. So I think as long as you're engaging in some of the relevant fora, you're covering the same work. So you're all good.
I think there's actually quite a few more questions for you, Mark. I'll group 2 of them so that you can conveniently dodge one if you want to, which is someone asking whether your annual reports or any public information is available regarding your annual budget use and other details. I assume that would be publicly available if you look for them, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, we're a UK registered company. You can find all of that information, and you can all of the usage and other details. We have an open API that you can pull literally anything through: altmetric scores, downloads, volume. You can pull all of the metadata out.
And then another question: whether you can see the benefits of ensuring Figshare complies with EOS standards and make it so that it easily federates into EOSC.
Yes, 100%. I think this is where one of the biggest roles that EOS can play is that making sure that there is an audited intersection of APIs, and making sure that you know, the different Lego blocks of the fast developing research data system can build on top of each other. And so, you know, keeping commercial companies compliant and saying this API does what it's supposed to do, and here's how you can pull all the information out, and having it plugged into other organizational apps as well. Yeah, I think APIs for everything is the future here. And I think there's things like the what are they called, the you have to write a data statement when you're
like
when
the
you're doing
DMPs or
DMP.
Yes.
That's exactly so it's exactly that. It's things like the DMP tool and DMP online merging together and coming up with a workflow for everybody and then plugging into that API. I think that's where central organizations like EOSC can have a lot of power.
Yeah, and I think this links into that question about like the regional catalogues. I think, you know, there are certain applications that are maybe used very heavily. So like you've got lots of institutions that have installations of Figshare. And if we're making sure that those major applications or the regional catalogues can feed in, then you're going to pull in a lot of content more quickly, make it easier to aggregate stuff into EOSC.
Yeah, I think we're very happy to hear that the answer to this question was yes, Mark, because it would have been probably a bit sad for us if it wasn't in this session. Then I think there's just one question left, which I'll probably pass to you, Sarah, which is whether the EOSC portal indexes or exposes repository or domain-specific metadata using standard API.
So I must confess, I don't know 100%. This is a question for Paolo, but I think it's important that we do. I mean, my understanding of the provide guidelines is that they're quite generic. So it's probably looking more at, you know, the Dublin core style level metadata. But obviously all of these different repositories that are being aggregated into EOSC will be using other standards that have domain specific metadata. I think there was a very nice model that was done under UDAT, the work they did around B2 Share, where essentially they have a common generic metadata set to allow them to aggregate from different repositories, but they also have like the extensions to that profile. So when you have science data or you know, social science data, you have the metadata in the relevant standard, so in DDI or whatever the standard is. I don't think the Provide uses DCAT. I assume it's its own standard. I would need to dig into what OpenAir Provide actually is, but I do think it's really critical that we adopt standards like schema.org or DCAT, because they are the things that are being used globally beyond EOSC and by various different providers. There has been a working group in RDA which has looked at relevant standards. We do have task forces within the EOSC Association, like the Semantic Interoperability Task Force, who've also looked at relevant standards. I see Taina probably wants to come in on this because I think you probably know more than I do on standards. But I think it's really important that we pick up on those and don't invent something new for EOSC.
Yes, the SOC project has also been looking sort of doing interoperable sort of matching, so matching different standards to each other. So because the point with standard is that if you use Dublin core and you have 2 million objects, it makes it harder for the people trying to find the data, because it's so general level. So researchers might want to find a particular from a particular topic or research data created in a certain way and stuff like that. So it sounds to me very good that if you have a standard where you have, and then you have extensions, so you can put into the extensions those that are important for a particular discipline.
Yeah, exactly, because people want to search by the variables or by the relevant features for their domain. So, and we need to respect that, because that's the metadata that's being collected by the domain repositories, and that's what researchers in that field need to use. So yeah, I think it's important we have that kind of cross search and the common elements of the metadata schema, but we need all the extensions as well. I don't know if Heinrich wanted to come in on that. I saw you put your camera on.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, maybe as you already mentioned, Sarah, so in EUDAT we have this B2 Share service, so quite where you can upload data and where you can extend your own or create your own metadata schema for your domain. And we have as well, so B2Find and OpenShare Explore, so where you can access to discovery portals on a generic level. So, and the plan is, as I think, yes, Sarah said, Paolo Manchi could better answer this. So the plan is in the future that that you have then one entry point in EOS, the EOSC portal, where you can discover data. So, and how this is implemented is that metadata are harvested from as well from B2Find and Figshare, etc. pp. And then finally there will be a graph on top of EOSC where you single sign on, and then you will be channeled through to the correct repository data. So this is as far as I know about the plans within EOSC.
Yeah, and maybe just one final reflection. So something that's coming out of both the interoperability framework guidelines that are coming out of EOS Future and the work of the task forces is, you know, the importance of crosswalks. And I think it's Taina who mentioned this. You know, there are so many different standards that are being used by the different domains, and really our role in EOSC is to be interoperable and make sure that we have crosswalks where it's relevant, where there's a proper practical use case between the standards, and to enable us to bring those different data collections together in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think maybe just going by what Paolo said in earlier meetings, is that the idea of having sort of a standard API for this is maybe the opposite in a way of what we want, because we want to make sure that EOSC is interoperable with as many other possible systems as possible. So maybe that's not the way that the direction that we're moving into.
We maybe need a set of APIs, you know, that build out to different standards, different repositories. And I think this is why we need to think about the most important ones to integrate with first, where we're going to get, you know, so the research infrastructures are critical for EOSC. We have to make sure that we integrate with the different research infrastructures, because that's the big content, the big amount of data. And then with platforms like Figshare, because again, that's used by so many institutions that you quickly bring on board a lot of people.
Yeah. So a lot of work ahead of us there, I think, but nice ambitions in any case. I think I'd like to wrap up here, but maybe Sarah, you have some final words as the expert from the EOSC Future Project.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks to the speakers. Thanks to Mark and Taina for coming and giving us showcases. As I said before, there's already a number of repositories that are getting involved in integrating in EOSC. It's still very much a work in progress, which you're probably seeing in these presentations. You can onboard into the catalogue, you can register your service, but we're not at the moment indexing all of your collections, but that is work that's going to happen. So do engage with us, do get involved, do let us know what works and what doesn't, because we need to improve the processes to make it simpler and to make it easier for people to interact and get involved in EOSC. And yeah, thank you all for attending, and to Catherine for organizing all of this.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here, and thanks to our speakers. I'm hoping to see some of you at least again in about 10 minutes for our next session of the day, which is something a bit different. It's EU research projects as EOSC providers. So looking at all the things that we are making in these EU funded projects, how can we make sure that we make those findable and accessible through the EOSC platform? So thanks everyone for joining, and see you in about 10 minutes. Bye everyone.